standing in the doorway of that high-end restaurant, watching my wife laugh over wine with another man. I thought I finally had all the evidence I needed. The secret phone calls, the late meetings, the mysterious jewelry box he just handed her. It was the perfect scene of betrayal. I was ready to expose everything, to tear their world apart. I never expected that in the next 72 hours, my entire life would unravel instead. Because sometimes when you go hunting for someone else's lies, you accidentally uncover your own. And my wife? She wasn't just gathering evidence. She was setting a trap that I walked right into. Looking back now, I can't help but wonder if my dedication to climbing the corporate ladder was worth losing everything I held dear. My name is Michael Thompson, and this is the story of how my perfect life fell apart in just 72 hours. They say hindsight is 20/20, and maybe if I hadn't been so focused on making partner at Anderson & Brooks law firm, I would have noticed the warning signs sooner. But I guess that's the thing about betrayal. It always comes from those closest to you. I never thought I'd be sharing this story on Reddit. But here I am. My wife Rachel and I had been married for 8 years, living what I thought was the American dream in our suburban Boston home. We met in law school, both driven by ambition and shared values. Or so I believed. I was 34, she was 32, and we had everything going for us. Until that Wednesday in September, when my world turned upside down. I was supposed to be in Chicago for a week-long conference with our biggest client. These trips were routine for me. Pack a suit, kiss Rachel goodbye, and hop on a plane. But this time, something felt off. Maybe it was the way she hugged me a little too long at the airport, or how her voice trembled slightly when she said, "I'll miss you." I brushed it off as stress from her new position at Carter & Williams, where she'd been working ridiculous hours with her new team. The conference was going great until Wednesday afternoon when we wrapped up early. Instead of staying the extra 2 days, I decided to surprise Rachel by coming home early. I should have called first. I really should have. But I wanted to be spontaneous for once, break out of my predictable routine. I caught the next flight to Boston, feeling like the perfect husband bringing roses and her favorite macarons from that fancy bakery near the conference center. When I tried calling her office to arrange the surprise, something strange happened. Her assistant Emma, who'd been with her for 3 years and never missed a day, was supposedly about sick. But what really got me was how the receptionist stumbled over Rachel's name. Not Mrs. Thompson as usual, but Ms. Carter. It was a small detail, but it nagged at me during the entire flight home. Looking around the crowded airport terminal while waiting for my luggage, I couldn't shake this growing sense of unease. Rachel and I had always prided ourselves on our rock-solid relationship. We were the couple our friends looked up to, always in sync, finishing each other's sentences. We had our routine down to a science. Sunday brunches at our favorite cafe in Beacon Hill, evening walks along the Charles River, weekly date nights where we'd try new restaurants around the city. But lately, those date nights have become less frequent, with Rachel constantly caught up in important client meetings or urgent case reviews. I checked my phone again. No missed calls, no messages from her. Just a generic, "Hope the conference is going well," text from this morning. As I hailed a cab outside Logan Airport, the setting sun casting long shadows across the terminal, I couldn't help but remember how different things felt just 6 months ago, before she took this new position. Before the late nights and missed dinners. Before the distracted conversations and the way she'd jump whenever her phone buzzed during our rare moments together. The cab pulled up to our Victorian-style home in Brookline, just as dusk was settling in. The house was dark, which wasn't unusual given the time. Barely 6:30 p.m. Rachel's BMW wasn't in the driveway, but that didn't surprise me either. She usually worked until 8 or 9 these days. I paid the driver and walked up our flagstone path, wheeling my suitcase behind me. The roses and macarons felt heavy in my other hand, their presence now somehow absurd. Standing on our porch, I noticed something odd. The security system light was off. Rachel always said it when she left for work. It was practically muscle memory for both of us after the break-in 2 houses down last year. Inside, the house felt different. You know that feeling when something's not quite right, but you can't put your finger on it? The air felt stale, like no one had been home for days. I flicked on the lights and headed to the kitchen to put the roses in water. That's when I noticed the first real red flag. The coffee maker was clean. Rachel never cleaned it in the morning, always saying she'd do it when she got home. It was our running joke. I'd clean it on weekends. She'd handle weekdays. My lawyer brain kicked in, and I started noticing other details. The mail on the counter was unopened. 3 days' worth. The gym bag she always left by the door was missing. The kitchen trash, which should have had yesterday's takeout containers according to our last phone call, was empty. I pulled out my phone and opened our security app. We'd installed cameras last year. Exterior only, we both agreed having them inside felt too intrusive. The footage showed Rachel leaving Tuesday morning in her usual rush, briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other. But she hadn't come home that night. Or the next. The camera caught her briefly yesterday afternoon, pulling up in her car, running inside for exactly 17 minutes, then leaving with a small duffel bag. My hands were shaking as I poured myself a scotch. I needed to think. My mind was trying to find rational explanations, but each one felt more hollow than the last. Work trip? She would have mentioned it. Visiting her sister? Emily was in Hawaii with her family. I'd seen the beach photos on Instagram this morning. I checked our shared location app. We'd started using it after her car broke down once late at night. Her location sharing was turned off. When did that happen? I scrolled through our text messages, trying to find any clues I might have missed. I was on my third scotch when my phone rang. Rachel's face lit up my screen. For a moment, I just stared at it, wondering if I should answer. What would I say? How could I keep my voice steady? On the fifth ring, I picked up, "Hey honey, just checking on the conference." Her voice was cheerful, too cheerful. In the background, I could hear the distinct sounds of restaurant chatter. "How's Chicago treating you?" My throat felt dry. "Oh, the usual conference stuff." I managed to keep my voice neutral. "Where are you?" "Sounds busy. Just grabbing dinner with the team." "Big case, lots to go over." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "You wouldn't believe the hours we're putting in. I'll probably be here late again tonight." I walked to our home office while she talked, booting up our desktop computer. Rachel had forgotten to log out of her email the last time she used it. "Must be an important case," I said, scrolling through her recent emails. "Which client is it?" She hesitated for a split second. "The Morrison merger. You remember me mentioning it?" Actually, she hadn't. And according to her email calendar, the Morrison case had been settled 2 weeks ago. "Listen, honey, I should go. The team's waiting for me to review some documents." "Of course," I said, my eyes fixed on an email thread I just found. Subject line, "Dinner reservations, tonight." From david.carter@claw.com. "Don't work too hard. Love you. Love you too." She hung up quickly. I clicked on the email thread. David Carter, the youngest partner at Carter & Williams, known for his aggressive litigation style and his reputation with female associates. Rachel had mentioned him a few times, always professionally. But these emails, they weren't professional at all. "Can't wait to see you tonight." Read one from this morning. "Wore that perfume you love," Rachel had replied. There were dozens of emails going back months. My hands were shaking as I opened attachment after attachment. Dinner reservations. Hotel confirmations. A receipt for a weekend getaway in the Berkshires, during that legal conference she'd attended last month. I was about to close the browser when a calendar notification popped up on her screen. DC, 8:30 p.m., the Bristol. That was one of Boston's most expensive restaurants, known for its romantic atmosphere. I checked my watch. 7:45 p.m. My Uber app was open before I realized what I was doing. The Bristol was only 20 minutes away. Part of me knew I should stay home, call a friend, try to think rationally. But the larger part, fueled by scotch and betrayal, hit the confirm ride button. As I waited for my ride, I did something I'd never done before. I took a photo of her email screen. Evidence. The lawyer in me was already thinking ahead, even as my heart was breaking. The Bristol was packed when my Uber pulled up, but through the window, I spotted them immediately. Rachel was wearing that black dress I'd given her for our anniversary, and sitting across from her was David Carter, looking every bit the hotshot lawyer in his tailored suit. They were in their own little world, heads close together, sharing what looked like a bottle of expensive wine. My blood was boiling, but I kept my cool. After all, timing is everything. I was about to storm in there, but something made me stop dead in my tracks. Through the window, I saw David pull out a small box, the kind that usually holds jewelry. Rachel's face lit up as she opened it. That's when I lost it. Before I knew it, I was through the door and heading straight for their table. Well, isn't this cozy? My voice carried across the restaurant, making several heads turn. Rachel's face went white as a sheet, and David looked like he'd seen a ghost. Having a nice dinner, honey? The Morrison merger must be going really well. Michael. Rachel jumped up, knocking over her wine glass. You're supposed to be in Chicago, and you're supposed to be my wife, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. But I guess we're both full of surprises tonight. That's when the evening took a wild turn. David stood up, trying to play it cool, but what he said next knocked the wind right out of me. Michael, this isn't what you think. I'm not sleeping with your wife. I'm helping her plan your 20th anniversary surprise. I laughed humorlessly. Our 8th anniversary, you mean? Can't even get that right while you're lying. Rachel grabbed my arm. No, Michael. Your 20th anniversary as a lawyer. I've been working with David because he knows everyone in the legal community. We're organizing a surprise gala in your honor next month. But the emails I'd found told a different story. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots. Really? So these intimate dinner dates and hotel reservations are all about planning my party. That's when the real bombshell dropped. David Carter's face changed from nervous to confused. Hotel reservations? Rachel, what is he talking about? The look that passed between them told me everything I needed to know. David might have been helping with some party planning, but Rachel had been playing both of us. The jewelry box on the table suddenly caught my eye again. I reached for it before either of them could stop me. Inside wasn't the expensive necklace or bracelet I'd expected. Instead, I found a vintage watch, a Rolex similar to the one my father had worn during his years as a judge. The card inside read, "To Michael Thompson, celebrating 20 years of legal excellence." Rachel was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. The party was real, she whispered. But you're right about the other things. The hotels, there's someone else. Not David. I'm so sorry. David looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. The other diners were trying hard not to stare, but I could feel their eyes on us. The maitre d' was hovering nearby, probably wondering if he needed to call security. Oh, I demanded, but I already knew. There was only one name in those emails I hadn't mentioned yet. One person who had been at all those hotel meetings. It's Carter Williams himself, isn't it? The founding partner. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. The next morning, I sat in my car outside Carter and Williams' law firm, watching the early birds arrive for work. My head was pounding from last night's scotch, but my mind was crystal clear. The watch box sat on the passenger seat, Rachel's only truth in a web of lies. At exactly 7:30 a.m., a silver Bentley pulled into the senior partner's reserved spot. Carter Williams stepped out, every inch the legal legend in his perfectly tailored suit. At 65, he still commanded the respect of everyone in Boston's legal circle, including, apparently, my wife. I waited until he was inside before making my move. His secretary recognized me. I'd been to enough firm events over the years. "Mr. Thompson, we weren't expecting you today." "Carter's expecting me," I lied smoothly. "It's about the Morrison case." She nodded and buzzed me in. I found him at his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing documents like it was any other morning. Like he hadn't been with my wife just hours ago. He looked up, surprised but not worried. "Not yet. Michael? This is unexpected. What brings you to our humble abode?" I closed his office door. "You know, it's funny. Last night, I had this whole conversation with Rachel about hotel rooms and secret meetings. But we never got to finish it because she was too busy crying about how she's been sleeping with you." The change in his expression was subtle, just a slight tightening around the eyes. He took off his glasses slowly. "I think you should sit down, Michael." "I think I'll stand." I pulled out my phone. "I have some interesting emails here. Want me to forward them to Mrs. Williams? I'm sure she'd love to read about your romantic getaway to the Berkshires." He didn't flinch. Instead, he pressed a button on his desk phone. "Janet, hold my calls, please." Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a file. "Since we're being direct, let me share something with you." Inside the file were photos, dozens of them, Rachel and me, at various times over the past year. Me entering our house when I was supposed to be at conferences. Different women following shortly after. The corporate apartment I thought nobody knew about. "Your wife hired us 3 months ago," Carter said quietly. "She suspected you were cheating, but needed proof for the prenup clause. I handled it personally because, Frankly, you've got quite a reputation in certain circles, Michael. The room started spinning. You're lying. Am I? He spread out more photos. The paralegal from Johnson and Myers? The client's wife from the Bronson case? That pretty bartender from the Wellington? He leaned back. Rachel's been gathering evidence for her divorce filing. The late nights, the hotel meetings. She was meeting with our private investigators. I collapsed into the chair, my legs giving out. Rachel hadn't been having an affair with Carter Williams. She'd been building a case against me. And I just confronted her in front of everyone at the Bristol, exposing her investigation. Carter's intercom buzzed. Sir? Mrs. Thompson is here for her appointment. Send her in, he said, his eyes never leaving my face. I believe it's time we had a frank discussion about your future at Anderson and Brooks. After all, sleeping with clients' wives tends to be bad for business. The door opened behind me, and I heard Rachel's familiar footsteps. Game over. Rachel stood in the doorway of Carter's office, her face a mask of calm professionalism. She wasn't wearing the black dress from last night anymore. She was back in her court attire, a navy suit that always meant business. I barely recognized the woman I'd married. You look terrible, Michael, she said, taking the seat next to me. Rough night? Carter cleared his throat. Mrs. Thompson has been kind enough not to notify the Bar Association about your indiscretions. Yet, he emphasized the last word, letting it hang in the air between us. However, given the circumstances, we believe it's time to discuss a settlement. My mind was racing. All those times I thought I was being careful, all those deleted messages and private meetings. She'd known everything. I thought about the women in the photos. Each one had been a mistake, a moment of weakness I'd justified to myself. Now they were evidence, ammunition against me. How long? I managed to ask. Remember that conference in New York? Rachel's voice was steady. The one where you said you had to stay an extra night for client meetings? Jessica from accounting saw you with that redhead from the murder team. She told me out of pity. The New York conference. 8 months ago. The beginning of the end, and I hadn't even known it. I wasn't sure at first, Rachel continued. I thought maybe it was a one-time thing. But then there was the bartender and the paralegal. She stopped, composing herself. I needed proof. For the prenup? Ah, yes, the prenup. The one my father had insisted on, worried that Rachel might be a gold digger. The irony was almost funny. The infidelity clause had been my idea. I'd been so confident, so arrogant. Carter pulled out another document. We're prepared to be reasonable. The house, half the savings, and your partnership at Anderson and Brooks remains intact. Provided, of course, that this stays quiet. And if I refuse? Rachel finally showed emotion, then a flash of anger in her eyes. Then these photos go to the ethics board. Every client whose wife you slept with, every case you worked on while engaging in misconduct. It all comes out. Your father's legacy, your career, everything you've worked for. Gone? I looked at the evidence spread across Carter's desk. Years of betrayal documented in crisp color photographs. The weight of my choices finally caught up with me. When were you going to tell me? I asked. About knowing everything? Last night, she said quietly. At the Bristol. I'd planned it all. A public place so you couldn't make a scene, David there as a witness. But you had to play the wronged husband, didn't you? Had to make it about you being the victim. The security guard escorted me to my office at Anderson and Brooks. I had 1 hour to pack my personal belongings, part of the reasonable settlement Rachel and Carter had arranged. My name would stay on the letterhead, but everyone would know I'd been forced out. As I packed my Harvard Law diploma and the photos of my father at his judgeship ceremony, my phone buzzed. A text from Jessica in accounting. I'm sorry. I had to tell her. I deleted it without responding. The betrayals were stacking up, but I had no right to feel betrayed anymore. My assistant Linda watched from the doorway as I emptied my desk. The partners are calling an emergency meeting this afternoon, she said softly. Should I still attend to take notes? You should ask Thomas. He'll be handling my cases now. I paused, then added, I'm sorry, Linda, for everything you've probably had to cover up over the years. She nodded, her expression unreadable. As she turned to leave, she stopped. Your wife came by last week, you know, while you were supposedly in Philadelphia. She met my eyes. She asked if I knew about the women. I lied for you, Mr. Thompson. That's the last time I'll ever do that. I sat in my leather chair, soon to be someone else's, and opened my laptop one last time. Dozens of emails had flooded in since last night. News traveled fast in Boston's legal circle. Most were from colleagues, expressing their concern and support. Empty words from people who'd already picked sides. One email caught my eye. From Rachel, sent an hour ago. Found this while cleaning out my desk. Thought you should have it. Attached was a photo from our first year of marriage. Us on the steps of the courthouse after winning our first case together. We looked so young, so full of promise. On the back, I'd written, "To many more victories together. I'll always be honest with you." The office door opened again. This time it was David Carter, looking uncomfortable. "Listen, Michael, about last night." "Save it." I cut him off. "You were just doing your job, being a good soldier for the firm. Actually, I wanted to show you something." He placed a folder on my desk. "Rachel doesn't know I have this. It's everything, the investigation, the surveillance reports, the photos. All dated and time-stamped." I leafed through the pages. Each photograph told a story of my infidelity. Each report detailed another lie. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you should know." She tried to stop the investigation. 3 times. He shifted uncomfortably. Said she wanted to confront you directly, give you a chance to explain. Carter Williams pushed her to keep gathering evidence. Said you'd just deny everything without proof. He was right, I admitted. I would have. Maybe. But she still loves you, Michael. Even after everything. He headed for the door. She's not filing the divorce papers until next week. Just think about that. After David left, I sat there surrounded by the wreckage of my career. My phone buzzed again, the bartender from the Wellington asking if I was okay. I blocked her number. Then I picked up the photo Rachel had sent and really looked at it. At the people we used to be. I pulled out my phone one last time and opened my recent calls. Rachel's number was still at the top of the list. My finger hovered over it. Outside my office, I could hear the whispers, the gossip already spreading. My reputation was in tatters, my marriage was over, and it was all my own doing. Or was it? David's words echoed in my head. She's not filing until next week. I found Rachel at our spot on the Charles River, the bench where I'd proposed 8 years ago. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "Linda told me you cleared out your office," she said, not looking at me. That was fast. Didn't see much point in dragging it out. I sat down beside her, leaving space between us. David showed me the full file. "You shouldn't have done that. Why did you try to stop the investigation?" I asked. 3 times, Rachel. "Why?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching a rowing team glide past on the river. "Because every time we found something new, every time we uncovered another lie, I kept hoping it would be the last one. That there would be some explanation that wouldn't destroy everything we built. I didn't deserve that kind of faith." "No, you didn't." She finally turned to look at me. "Do you know what hurts the most? Not the affairs, though those are bad enough. It's that you became exactly what my father said you would be. A man who thinks rules don't apply to him." Her words hit hard. I remembered her father at our wedding, pulling me aside to warn me that if I ever hurt his daughter, no law degree would protect me. I'd been so offended, so righteous in my denial. "The bartender from the Wellington called me today," Rachel continued. "She's 23, Michael. She thought you were separated. They all did." She pulled something from her bag, a stack of papers. The divorce filing. I had Carter add a clause. Full disclosure to the ethics board, but with a recommendation for leniency if you agree to counseling. Why would you do that? Because despite everything, I remember who you were when we met. That idealistic law student who wanted to change the world. She stood up, brushing off her skirt. Maybe he's still in there somewhere. And if he is, then he knows what he needs to do. She placed the divorce papers on the bench between us. "I'm staying at Emily's. You have until Monday to decide. Sign these and walk away with your career intact, or fight it and lose everything." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "The party, the 20-year celebration, was that real?" "Yes. I started planning it before I knew. I guess part of me wanted to remind you of who you used to be." She paused. "The watch is yours to keep. It belonged to your father's partner, the one who inspired you to become a lawyer. Carter found it at an estate sale." I watched her walk away, the divorce papers heavy in my hands. 20 years ago, I'd stood before the bar and sworn an oath to uphold justice. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten what that meant. Sunday morning found me sitting in my home office, staring at a blank document on my laptop. The divorce papers Rachel had left sat unopened beside me. Tomorrow was the deadline, and I still hadn't made my decision. The house felt different now. Every room held memories of lies, both hers and mine. The living room where I'd taken calls from clients late at night. The kitchen where she'd planned her investigation over morning coffee. The bedroom where we'd both slept, keeping our secrets. After 3 attempts, I finally started typing. Dear Ethics Committee, I, Michael Thompson, am writing to self-report multiple violations of the Professional Code of Conduct. Over the past 18 months, I have engaged in inappropriate relationships with clients and their spouses, betrayed attorney-client privilege, and compromised the integrity of several cases. The words came easier after that. Every affair, every ethical breach, every time I'd chosen my desires over my duties. It was like lancing a wound, painful but necessary. By the time I finished, the sun had set. My phone buzzed. A text from David Carter. Carter Williams called an emergency partner meeting for tomorrow morning. Says he has an announcement about your situation. Of course he did. He was probably planning to use my downfall as a cautionary tale, cementing his reputation as the moral compass of Boston's legal community. The great Carter Williams, who'd helped expose a corrupt lawyer while comforting his betrayed wife. I printed my confession and drove to Rachel's sister's house. Emily's car wasn't in the driveway, probably giving Rachel space. I could see a light on in the upstairs guest room. Instead of knocking, I slipped the envelope containing my ethics confession under the door. Then I sent Rachel a text. I'm not signing the papers. You deserve the whole truth, and so does everyone else. I'll face whatever consequences come. Her reply came quickly. The committee will suspend your license. I know. You could be disbarred. I know that too. A long pause, then why? I thought about the photos she'd sent me, about the people we used to be. Because that idealistic law student you remember? He wants to earn back your trust, even if it costs him everything else. Through the window, I saw her silhouette appear. For a moment, I thought she might come down. Instead, she texted again. The committee meets at 9 a.m. Don't be late. As I drove home, another text came through from Linda, my assistant. Mr. Williams was in the office all weekend, shredding files. Something about old case records. Thought you should know. I smiled for the first time in days. Carter Williams had made one crucial mistake in his perfect plan. He'd underestimated Linda's loyalty. And he'd forgotten that his private file room shared a ventilation system with my old office. The ethics committee boardroom was packed. Every senior partner from Boston's top firms was there. No one wanted to miss the fall of Michael Thompson. Carter Williams sat in the front row, looking appropriately grave. Rachel sat on the opposite side, her expression unreadable. I walked to the podium, my confession in hand, but before I could speak, Linda slipped into the room and handed me a USB drive. I smiled at Carter's suddenly pale face. Before I begin my prepared statement, I said, I'd like to submit some additional evidence. Files that Mr. Williams thought he'd destroyed this weekend. Records of his own ethical violations spanning the last decade. The room erupted in whispers. Carter stood up, but I continued. Fraudulent billing records. Buried evidence. Witness tampering. And most importantly, proof that he deliberately manipulated my wife's investigation, prolonging it to gather more dirt on me. Not for justice, but for leverage over Anderson and Brooks. Rachel was staring at Carter now, her lawyer's mind clearly connecting dots I'd missed for months. I'm here to confess my sins, I continued. Every affair, every betrayal, it's all in my written statement. I accept whatever punishment the committee deems appropriate. But Mr. Williams doesn't get to play judge and jury. Not anymore. 2 hours later, it was done. My law license was suspended for 18 months, pending completion of ethics courses and counseling. Carter Williams faced his own investigation. And Rachel waited for me outside. You could have used those files to save yourself, she said as we walked along the Charles River. Made a deal? That's what the old Michael would have done. I stopped at our bench. I meant what I said last night. I want to earn back your trust. However long it takes. She sat down, patting the space beside her. The divorce papers are still unsigned. They'll stay that way, unless you want to sign them. I'll understand if you do. 18 months is a long time to rebuild trust, she said softly. Good thing I don't have any other cases to work on. For the first time in months, she smiled. A real smile, not the practiced one she'd worn during her investigation. The party plans are still in place. Seems a shame to waste them. A celebration of my suspension? Bold choice. No. She took my hand. A celebration of second chances.